Boy meets girl, boy and girl fall in love, get married, have some kids. Sounds like a typical love story, right? And in some ways, Chris and Emily Norton's love story does sound like a romance we're familiar with. But their journey to husband and wife has entailed 7 of the longest yards. I'm Julie Lyles Carr. This is the Modern Motherhood Podcast from All Mom Does. And today, get ready to hear one of the most inspirational, honest, and powerful conversations about marriage, being differently abled, being a caregiver, what it's like to adopt 5 kids in a year. Well, you're just going to have to take a listen. Chris and Emily, thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, great to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Y'all have been married just about a year. Is that right?
That's right.
That's right. And that is probably where people may know you from. But I tell you another thing I want to just touch on real quick, just so that our listeners make sure they keep their ears perked up. You have been married for just a little over a year, but you also are now parents to 5. And we're going to talk about how your family was built so quickly a little further in the interview. But where a lot of people may know you from is this incredible video. And it was just something that went viral. It was so inspiring. And Emily, it was you helping Chris walk across the stage at his college graduation. Chris, why would you have needed help to walk across the stage? What was going on in your life? And just catch us up on that.
Yeah, so on October 16, 2010, I was playing college football at Luther College in Decorah, Iowa, and I was running down the field for the kickoff, and I make a diving play to make a tackle, and I mistimed my jump just by a split second where my head collided right with his legs, and I suffered a severe spinal cord injury, and I was flown out to have emergency surgery, and gave me a 3% chance to ever regain any feeling or movement back below the neck. And that's where my life was flipped upside down, and just trying to an everyday grind to try to get a little bit more back from that neck down. And so I just started out with a shoulder shrug, and I just kept getting stronger and stronger, and then was wheelchair bound, but was still working on walking and training. And so that's kind of where how my college career started, and which made that graduation walk very difficult, to go from a 3% chance to being helped across the stage.
Absolutely incredible. And so many people have seen that video now. Now, Emily, were y'all dating at the time of this football injury, or how did y'all meet?
No, so we met a few years after Chris was injured. Through a dating app we met, and we just had an instant connection, and it just felt like we had known each other for so long, and like this was just part of God's plan bringing us together, that he had an amazing purpose, and we just had this connection early on where we felt that.
And what did you feel in terms of a culture that sometimes is all about optics and all about those kinds of a thing? How did you feel entering into a relationship where you knew someone had a physical challenge? And I asked this from a place of my 8 children. 2 are identified with special needs. One has a significant hearing loss. One had a stroke at birth. And so her physicality is different. You know, she has weakness on the left side. And I'm curious to hear how you approach this idea of going into a relationship with someone who was differently abled.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the beginning, I literally had never known anybody who used a wheelchair, except for my grandma, like to get around when she was outside the house. So that was very, very new for me, but I'm also very curious, and I love getting to know people with just different stories and different things to offer. So I was very drawn to it. And I truly believe that just we're supposed to follow how God would view us and who we are on the inside, and get to know people for who they are. So I tried to do that. And Chris was very confident in his skin, which was helpful. There was definitely fears, some from family members or friends, about how that would look like going forward. I know I had fears about how we could ever have kids and parent kids when so much would be on my plate. And just as time went on, with that instant connection, and he had every single quality that I was looking for in a man, everything, great listener, super hard work ethic. And I knew that with him, that no matter what we went through, we would get through it because of how strong of faith he had. So I focused on all of those things. And then we have just continued to have the attitude of like, we'll make it work. Like whatever it is, you find a way. It's when you're not in the situation, you kind of fear what it's going to be like. But when you're in it, you just make it work.
Chris, for you, do you find that following your injury, did you have people who struggled to really even acknowledge or feel like they had permission to talk about what had happened and the challenges you were facing? Or did you find some people who were well-intended but said really stupid stuff? Like help us know how to navigate those waters when we encounter someone or when we have someone in our world, in our lives that we love who's going through a very significant physical change.
Yeah, that's a really complex question. And I'm sure probably get a different answer from anyone like with a physical challenge. But I know like for me and like my experience, like it is what it is. Like I don't mind people acknowledging, what happened to me or be curious and want to know more, because I'd rather them know what's happening like with my body than just leave it off the table, I guess. It just makes me honestly feel more comfortable too, to be able to just acknowledge it, because obviously it's something that you see. You can't avoid it. You can't hide my challenges. Most of our challenges you can't see, but mine you can definitely see. And so something with Emily that was really compelling about her, and which really piqued my interest beyond just her beauty, was that she was very curious about my physical challenges and just how I was able to get through and have the kind of mindset that I do, given everything that I've gone through. And so that just like gave me the opportunity to be a little bit more vulnerable. And I think when you can be vulnerable with somebody else, that's when you can make the deepest connection. And so that's where our connection really started, was with Emily's curiosity and just be willing to ask the hard questions of, Chris, what was it like, waking up after surgery with a 3% chance? What were you thinking? Like, how'd you get through that? And so everyone's scared to ask that question, but Emily just went right for it, like right in the beginning. Like she didn't care. And I appreciated that. Like you said, some of the stupid things that people say, like I would say something that, I understand they're coming from a place of compassion and they mean well. But when people come up to me and they tell me how sorry they are for my life and being in a wheelchair and stuff like that, it kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit, just because like I love my life. I don't feel sorry for myself. Like I'm glad I had my injury. Like my injury led me to meeting Emily and my speaking and the book and film and inspiring millions of people. Like this is a great opportunity. My family. Like I don't feel sorry for myself at all. So it's just when people just automatically assume that I feel sorry for my life and I'm miserable, it's just not the case. Now there might be someone who is miserable in a chair, but it's just not me. So just treat each person just as a unique person and they have different experiences. So I'd say that. And also when I travel too, on like an airplane, there's so many times when someone who's helping us would address someone else like next to me, like I can't talk.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, that has just drove me nuts.
Yep.
And I say comments right back, because I like want people to realize they can't just make judgments on what they see. But so many people assume that he can't talk, so they're like, oh, what does he want to drink? I'm like, he can talk. You can ask him.
Yeah, you can ask.
He can't speak because he's in a wheelchair.
Yeah. And so, Emily, for you, you had gotten to know him. You helped him in this walk across the stage for his college graduation. But then you started noticing in him that he was starting to lose some focus in the training and the goals that he had to maximize what he could following this accident. So you issued a challenge to him that's very interesting. What was that challenge?
So what happened exactly was the graduation walk went viral a second time. And we had just thousands and thousands of people reaching out, sharing how much hope this gave them. And it really grew our platform to realize that people were believing in God for the first time. And they're going from hopeless to having hope, believing in love again. We had all of these people reaching out who had gone through the most terrible things that you could ever imagine, who were finding strength and hope in God. So I was right to Chris. I'm like, hey, we have to do this wedding walk. We don't have another choice. We have to do this. This is another opportunity that God is giving us, and we cannot miss this opportunity to impact other people and and just share that there is always hope when you have God and when you work hard. So that is what really got him, pumped up again and ready to go, because we both have realized that we're so much more motivated when you're doing something to impact someone else instead of just for your own benefits. And we get that purpose and that drive. It just makes you to do so much more. So then that really got us going and ready to make the most of the opportunity that God was giving us with the wedding walk.
And people have now seen that video as well millions of times. We'll make sure that we have both links for both the graduation walk and the down the aisle experience in our show notes. Chris, talk about the process of preparing for marriage. And Emily, I want to hear your thoughts on this as well. We take couples through different, programs and things that we have. I love the Symbis program by Les Parrott. But is there a particular lane that couples who realize that they're going to walk into marriage with one of them having a challenge that will require a certain level of caregiving or management by their partner? Are there some things that they should know about or be thinking about as they prepare for marriage?
I'd say that given the time that we've spent together in the years, Emily, I felt like she understood exactly what she was getting into. And I felt comfortable about that too, that she knew exactly what she was getting into. So I think there was just a comfort level there of just having spent so much time together and knowing each other's challenges and where I will need help with. There was complete transparency there. And I think that's important, to have that transparency.
Oh, yeah. And I would say the biggest thing because I was Chris's full-time caregiver for a long time. And the biggest thing when you take on that role is making sure that you can do what also makes you come alive. And that it's not just completely focusing on caregiving for your husband or whoever it is. So that was something that was really beneficial for me and for our relationship as well, when we got some extra help coming in. Because at first I didn't want any help. I'm somebody who likes to do everything myself. But that was helpful to get some extra help with caregivers for Chris. So I was able to still do some certain things that really made me come alive and things that I enjoyed. So then we both had our own thing that we were doing that brought us joy and happiness.
I think that's a really important distinction, because for my parents, my dad was in a wheelchair for about the last 15 years of his life. And my mom, very much hinged like you, Emily, wanted to do everything. And so, they didn't start marriage in the way that y'all did with this dynamic in play, but the end of their very long marriage was that dynamic. And they really struggled to navigate. It was hard, and there weren't a lot of examples out there for them. And so I think it's beautiful that you recognized early on, you know what? Loving this guy, loving the role I'm in, chose this. But yeah, I need to make sure that I'm getting my cup filled in ways that are important, and Chris is getting his cup filled in ways that are important, because that makes us better together as a couple. I think that's very, very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that was really helpful as well with our relationship too was when Chris was really appreciative of the help I was giving him. That was helpful, because I love him so much and have for a long time. So you do everything for somebody you love, and you just kind of do it. But when he was extra appreciative and really showed that appreciation, that helped make it a little bit easier. And then like I said, just finding something that you can do was very helpful for a relationship, because we did struggle a while with navigating that, which I'm guessing most people do.
Yeah. When you kind of are in that spot of receiving the caregiving, and there's things that you just flat out can't do, and it's just apparent, it's sometimes easy to just take that for granted and just to be expectant of that help because you can't do it. But even if you need that help, and everyone knows you need that help, but just always to give appreciation is really key for sustaining that relationship, and that just a good quality of care between each other, and just respect too.
And you bring up a key phrase, Chris, that I like, where you talk about care for each other. I think one of the misnomers that people could have from the outside looking in of a marriage that has the dynamic that y'all's does is that somehow, Emily's the one providing all the care and help. And yet, Emily, you write about and talk about that you went through some times of deep depression, and that Chris was the one who was really caring for you during those seasons. Talk about that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That is so true. There's so many times that people look into our relationship and have made comments to me like, "Oh, you're such an angel for being with Chris," and all of this kind of stuff, which is so far from the reality. But I went through a really hard time of depression and struggling with anxiety after college, and just really being able to, I guess, sustain my purpose of what God gave me to care for kids in foster care. And so during that time, Chris was there by my side the whole time. I told him, like, I probably would have left you with the way that I was. I was so not the person that I am or that I've ever wanted to be. And he was there and he did not understand it at all. We were both didn't understand it. So neither of us handled it right at all. But he was there, which was so helpful and so beneficial. Like I've always told people, yeah, Chris needs help with his physical needs, but like his mentality on life and his work ethic is so beneficial to me and has inspired me so much and helped me as well with my mentality on working hard and just having a positive outlook on life.
We'll be right back with our conversation with Chris and Emily Norton. You are so appreciated, my friend. When I talk with our content coordinator, Rebecca Beckett, and with our producer, Donna Toti, we are just blown away by your response to the podcast, the way you tune in. And we want to make sure that we are bringing you the guests and content that encourage you in your life and who help give you the tools and information that help you grow in your parenting, your marriage, your work life, and your spiritual walk. So be sure and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts and get in touch with us at All Mom Does on the socials and at allmomdoes.com. We're pulling together new interviews and content for you, and we want to hear from you. So leave us your comments, your questions, and your suggestions when you head to allmomdoes.com. Now, Chris, how long had y'all dated before you got married?
It would have been about 3 years.
And now you've been married for a year, and you, kaboom, at a year, have 5 kids. I mean, this is amazing. And you have adopted a young woman who Emily had from her hometown, and she had already aged out of the foster care system, but Emily had been mentoring her and felt that there was this real call to make sure that this girl had family. I absolutely love that. And then you've also adopted 4 girls who are biological sisters, ages 2 through 9. But in the midst of all of that, you're still also actively fostering. So talk about your journey to wanting to build your family in this way.
Well, I've always wanted since I was a really young girl to adopt, but we were definitely not planning on adopting yet. But when we started fostering Whitley and then the 4 girls, we just knew that they were our kids. And we knew that they were supposed to be with us forever. So it wasn't really like part of the plan. It just was part of God's plan. Which a lot of times God has so much greater of a plan than what we had in the first place. Yeah, so we now have the 5 kids, and then we're still fostering because we know that there is such a great need for kids to be with family, not separated from siblings. Like when we first got the call about the 4 girls, they're like, can you help at all? Even if you can just take one of them, because there aren't enough families. And the caseworker was absolutely shocked that all 4 girls were placed together because they had been in foster care previously and they were separated. And so it was a really unique and amazing situation to be able to keep them together. So that doesn't happen a lot. So we just had a little sibling group of 2 little girls who were with us for 2.5 months and just said goodbye a few weeks ago, which is always the scariest part for people. But it's hard. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's not hard. It is so hard to say goodbye. They felt like our kids. We loved them with everything we had, loved them like our adopted kids. But it was so worth it. Like, just being able to bring life and love and helping these kids to know they're special. They left knowing those things, which is amazing.
And Chris, for you, you're now surrounded by women on all sides. Like you are in the estrogen haze. How's that been?
I mean, it's been good. Like I'm learning a lot, and they just bring so much joy in life to it's every moment. There's never a dull moment. There's always something going on, which just makes life so much more exciting. And going into it, I was terrified. I was just thinking, how could I, be a parent from a wheelchair? What's that going to be like? How am I going to help? How's my life going to change? And I have to give up so much of my free time and kind of that life that Emily and I were enjoying, but we realized that when you can give up those little comforts, that your life is so much more fulfilling, and you realize your potential when you just take on more than what you think you can handle.
Now, Chris, you're very in demand as a motivational speaker, and you're doing a lot of speaking and traveling and all of those things. So here you are in this first year of marriage, navigating all of that new dynamic. You've got these 5 kids now that are also part of that dynamic. How are y'all working together as partners to make sure that you're getting on the road and doing what you love doing, and that Emily is handling things and doing all the other stuff? How is that all working?
Yeah, I mean, it's working great. I would say this, like, before we took on like the army of the kids, we had that conversation. I was like, Emily, this brings me life. This is like, I love my work of traveling and speaking. It gets more in demand, and I'm getting booked more and more. Like, there's going to be times where I'm going to be away. Are you going to be able to manage and handle this? Like, am I going to have to cut back? And she said, no, like, I can do this. Like, I'll be fine. Like, she's like Wonder Woman without the cape. Like, she just is a go-getter, full of life. And she's like, I can do this. I can handle this. And she has. And she does it so beautifully and so well. I don't know how she does it. It's amazing. I'm like in awe of everything that she does for the kids, and she just brings so much life and love and compassion, and her example that she sets of just like a Jesus loving woman is incredible.
And Emily, you said that from the time you were really little, this has always been part of your heart and your heartbeat, to be helping those children who don't have homes. How does it feel to be living that out real time now?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I honestly, I never would have ever expected to be where we are at the age of 26, and just being able to be a foster parent. We fostered 17 kids over the past 3 years, and it's just absolutely amazing to be able to live out that dream, because I've known for so long, like, this is my purpose. And there were so many things that had fears of, and the unknown, but when you're in it, you just it makes me become so alive and full of joy. And it is absolutely the best thing I've ever done. And I just truly am so thankful that I followed the calling that was on my life, and figured out ways where I was able to handle the different things too. Because when you walk into this world of foster care, there are some very, very hard things, and you hear these terrible stories of what kids have gone through. And I've learned to give it to God instead of keeping it on my shoulders and taking that responsibility for myself, but instead teaching these kids to go to God, who is able to change darkness to light, and give hope to the hopeless, and just change everything. And that's where I've seen the absolute biggest impact, is when I'm able to help kids in our care learn how to pray and be at church, and learn that God has an amazing plan for their life, and he didn't want any of the bad things to happen to them, and he was there every step of the way, and he's going to turn it into something wonderful for them in their life.
At this point in this journey, I have so many personal friends, people in my home congregation, and then those listening to the podcast who do have an interest in pursuing foster care and looking at that, who want to adopt and are trying to determine ways to be able to do that, with more and more countries for international adoption closing their borders. But, there is this built-in risk within fostering that I think sometimes people find to be so daunting. So how do you leave your heart open in a foster care situation so that you can love kids well, and yet at the same time knowing that the potential exists for them to be taken back out of your home? How do you navigate all that? How do you make sure you're staying healthy in the midst of wanting to be so giving, but at the same time, at risk of having your heart broken all the time?
Yeah, I've definitely had to change my perspective a lot. And again, like right before we started fostering, thinking about having to say goodbye before I did it sounded impossible. It sounded like I would never be able to get through something like that. But when you have these kids in your home, and every single day when you change your perspective to, I'm just going to do what I can with the days that I have, the minutes I have, and pour love into these kids and be there through the hard moments and help them to go to God when they're struggling, that's when I've been able to change it to trying not to worry about the future, which obviously happens. But when I am, to just pray, to stay in the moment and go to God and stay in the Bible and in God's word has been very, very important to be able to foster. And just having that perspective of, I want these kids to know unconditional love. I want them to know that they are not alone and that God has an amazing plan for their life. And if I only have a month with them, a few weeks or a year, like, I'm going to do every single thing in my power to do that every day. So at the end, if we do have to say goodbye, that I know for a fact that we impacted them in their life and did every single thing we could to show them love. And there's so many kids who have come through our home who had no idea what love is. And they felt like if they messed up, the comments would be, you don't love me anymore. And teaching them, no, that is not how love works. Like when the kind of love that you have from God and from us is it's forever, no matter what you do, no matter what you say, we are here and we will always love you. So that is where it has always been worth it every single time. And we just had our 2 kids that we fostered right after Whitley. And I still love those kids. Like they are my kids. We still get to stay in contact with them. They've been reunified, but it's been over a year, about a year since they left. In my heart, or almost 2 years. And my heart literally still aches when I see them and when they come for visits. But it is so worth it. Like I just can't explain how worth it is to just see the impact that we're able to make. And we're still in a lot of the kids that have left in their lives and able to support their families. And just knowing that is so, so beneficial to help us to continue fostering.
Just incredible. Just incredible. Now, Chris, you have built a pretty unconventional marriage and built a family in a pretty unconventional way. How did y'all's families handle that? Did your families have concerns? Were they on board? What was the response to both your relationship with Emily and then also entering foster care and adopting?
Yeah, my family were just like, wait a second, like, do you realize what you're doing? Like, this isn't like part of the steps, like, like there's this concrete steps of how life is supposed to work. You, right after you get engaged, you get married, and then you start having your own children. And we kind of just shook that all up where we got into foster care before we were married. We were kind of thrust into that where Whitley, our first child, called Emily and was just like in a mess and needed a place desperately. And we felt like if we didn't offer our little apartment up for her, that it could cost her life. And that's where we started fostering before we were even married. Again, it was something that my parents and families were like, do you realize what you're getting yourself into? And just very cautious about all that. But again, we just felt like it was God's calling and we just had to answer the call and it was worth for another life. But yeah, it's been all very unconventional and it's something that I would have never been able to draw up in a million years. And it just makes life, though, more exciting when you just keep answering the call, even no matter how scary it is or how uncertain the future is. It just gives us more life.
And I just think that's incredible to go ahead and follow that, even when it doesn't seem to be the expected, 5-year plan of blah, 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 whatever. I think it's just amazing. Now, in addition to building your family this way, you also took on an endeavor that, at least in my experience, for me, this was like having another baby. The process of writing books and getting them out there, to me, was one of the closest things I had experienced to actually having my kids. And so you took that on as well. And your new book is going to be coming out this summer called The 7 Longest Yards. So talk to me about that writing process and how you partnered in putting together this book with the story of your romance, of the things that you're passionate about, and the things that you've learned along the way.
Yeah, I mean, it helped that we had a great agent, and then we also had a great writer in Mark Tabb, a New York Times bestselling writer. So having that team to support us really made our jobs a lot easier. And then it was just a lot of phone calls, a lot of interviews, and a lot of back and forth with our writer, Mark Tabb, and just really just dive in deep to moments in your life that you never expected to revisit. Like you mentioned earlier, like the anxiety and depression, that timeline with Emily and I, our relationship was really on the rocks. That was kind of hard. That was really hard to revisit and to relive because you had to go back to that place. And it was just a place that we had moved on from and we've healed from, and it's made us stronger. But having to go back and just be very vulnerable is tough. You have to just be vulnerable in so many different ways. But what we hope is that we can show people that even if you don't know where you're going, just to keep going, just to have hope, just keep taking one foot in front of the other, even in the face of the impossible.
And Emily, what's it been like for you getting this book out there? And again, as Chris was saying, reliving some of the hard parts and yet also needing to stay very present for the kids that you're raising and all of the changes that you've experienced in the last year.
Oh, yeah, it was extremely hard. It's still is a bit scary with everything going on, just because I hate being vulnerable, and it's something I'm working on, but it's hard. It's so hard for me. I'm very independent and used to be a big perfectionist. And so that was really hard, is opening up and sharing the details of the depression and anxiety, which is already so hard to talk about in general, on top of me being very closed off about things and not wanting to be vulnerable. So that was really, really hard to just to get that out there. But I truly believe that it's part of God's plan, and I'm doing it even though it's hard, because I know that there's so many other people out there who are suffering alone like I was. And I want every person who's going through hard things to know that no matter what, you are not alone. The answer is God. And when you can go to him and lean on him, pray, and find the right people to just lift you up during hard times, put in the hard work, even when you feel like you can't do anything, that things can change and they will change. And just realizing that there is always hope.
Well, Chris and Emily, I can't wait for our listeners to hear your story and to read about the places and things that you have been through and that kind of hope that you bring. So the book is called 7 Longest Yards. And I love this. You're offering the first 2 chapters of the book. If listeners will simply text the words 7 yards, you can either make that the digit 7 and then yards, or 7 yards, 2 words, to 44222. You'll get those 2 free chapters of the book to check out. We'll make sure that's in the show notes as well. Chris and Emily, thank you so much for your vulnerability, your willingness to talk about what has to this point been a pretty unconventional romance and development of a marriage and now family. We are all cheering you on and just so encouraged and filled with such hope watching all the things that you're doing. Thank you for such powerful reminders.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Get on those socials and connect with Chris and Emily and let them know how much you appreciated them today on the podcast. You'll find Chris at Chris A. Norton 16 on Instagram and Emily Summer Norton for Emily on Instagram. And be sure and check out the show notes that our awesome content coordinator, Rebecca Beckett, puts together for each episode with extra info, links, and more. And speaking of our team, a big thanks to Donna Toti as well, our producer extraordinaire. I'd love it if you'd come say hi on the socials as well. I'm Julie Lyles Carr at all the places, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And be sure and check out All Mom Does at allmomdoes.com and on the socials. It's a great resource, and it's also a great community where you'll find other women on the same journey as you, navigating all things momhood, relationships, work life, and faith. I'll see you next time on the Modern Motherhood Podcast.